I'm Mark Baer. This is the YourTown television program. My guest, artist Pat Watson, artist and educator.
Thank you.
Let's start with CSUMB.
Okay. What would you like to know?
What do you do there?
My primary role is in teaching digital art. And what that means is I want to take the digital tools that are put at our disposal and apply them to a more open-ended and exploratory creative process. A lot of people have this belief that basically if you have the software, that by definition makes you creative. And it doesn't really work that way, because that's actually one of the chronic issues is the really good people with digital media. It's more than just running an image through Photoshop. There is a tremendously sophisticated series of events that you have to engage to be able to create something that really has compelling content and resonates emotionally. And you can see that in the proliferation of really fine short-form animations that are done by a single person, whereas 50 years ago it would have taken a major studio and 200 or 300 people to create something like that. And so now you get these just marvelous 3D animations that are done by one person. And then also it translates into such things as the just tremendous number of wonderful documentaries that are basically made by one or two people with a digital video camera and a home editing setup. So the digital realm has opened up a level of creativity unprecedented in the history of culture and civilization. And I would like to be as enmeshed in that as I can.
Well, I've been to your classes. I've sat in, I've watched what you do. I've watched you teach these kids with this amazing technology. I also know that you are not trying to fit them with the skill set for a factory job. You're trying to make them think. You make them want to be cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary. You want them to know the history of what they're getting into, and you want them to be creators, not, Pixar doesn't need that many more button pushers.
Well, yes, that's really true. And actually, in various industries related to digital creativity, there are slang terms. Like one of them is called a wrist monkey and a mouse jockey. And there used to be the saying that, once you get carpal tunnel syndrome, your career is over. And you need to be more creative than that, because the university is intended to emphasize critical thinking and creativity. That's how new ideas get generated. And the digital tools we have in terms of visual creativity can facilitate that. And we currently live in a culture where there's a tremendous emphasis that you need to know more programming, you need to know more math, you need to know more science. And I totally subscribe to that to an extent. However, the major achievements in programming and science all come from highly creative minds, most of whom have a creative practice on their own, whether it be music, whether it be performance, singing, or visual arts. It's very common with a lot of the very sophisticated digital visionaries to have a sideline in a creative practice that facilitates their growth and expansion. Yeah,
and I know that, just being in your class, I know that there's always pushback. Kids don't want to get out of their lane. They want to learn this thing, and they play this game. They want to learn this thing.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed with you is you've always instilled that it's a lot harder than that. A lot more is required.
Yeah.
That they have to be better than their teacher to get that job.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Just being as good enough in the class is not good enough.
Well, and that's one of the areas where the arts are really important, because I try and instill in them the idea that you have to have a passion for what you're doing. And in a lot of ways, it's easy to instill in someone a passion for creativity because it taps so deeply into the soul. In a lot of ways, we're tied between this idea, I need to get a job, I need to make money, I want to have a household, I want to sustain my family. But then again, on the other hand, as we all know, that can be stifling. And a lot of people are relatively successful in very, what we would call more conventional, straight-laced career paths. Later in life, they yearn for a more creative avenue because it satisfies the soul. And I don't want people to figure that out when they're 65. And digital tools are incredible ways of doing this. For instance, the things people can do to make music with digital tools are immensely satisfying just at home on their own. And I do want them to understand that, because we get a lot of students that basically just kind of want to keep their heads down, stay below the radar, make their money, and hang out. And, that's the nature of life at that point in life. And I push them.
And you push yourself, and as a professional artist, what I've always loved about you is you brook no nonsense. You expect people to work as hard as you do, and you work hard. Let's go to you and I have been having a series of conversations about surrealism in terms of surrealism in the now. And not as a historical art movement, but surrealism as a application for the now moment. Let's look at some art.
Okay.
Go ahead and let's talk over what you're doing here.
Well, basically, I try and work with metaphors that resonate with me. And when you work with metaphors, you can't always specifically explain how it works. You just land on it and you go, well, that's kind of cool. That's provocative. And so I got into this idea of how we try and support our fractured egos with all of these very flimsy excuses and ideas. But in the end, they never work. And so the idea with this image is actually, we have the fractured egos. And then if I get into the whole symbolism of various mythologies and whatnot, we've got the fluttering banners that are bright red, which gets into all sorts of mystical stuff associated with Eastern wisdom. And then we have, on the right-hand side, we have the dancing spirit that exists inside of all of us.
And then we have our fragile edifices.
Yes, the fragile edifice, absolutely.
Let's go to the next one. Next image, please. Well, there
it is. All right, and this one is titled Deus Ex Machina, the Greek term for God in his machine. Well, God in his machine is relatively fragile, smudged, and the door is a little bit broken. And from there comes meaning. And blankets, blankets are a wonderful symbol of us psychologically, because they, for instance, I think everybody when they were an infant had a blankie, and then we wrap ourselves in blankets of various things and so forth and so on. So that's the idea at this one. And then the underneath, well, we went faster than I wanted, but underneath that is what, underneath this is what, was it Michel Foucault or Baudrillard? The Desert of the Real.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I love that.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on. Yeah. Now, this one represents, symbolically, in the way my mind works, so, once again, we have these structures trying to support something that can't be done. And then we have a doorway through a shrine. And shrines are kind of a quasi-religious and spiritual pathway. And the truth of the matter is that simply opens up into the expanse of what is truly real.
And then behind all your edifices, there's this grand nature that overwhelms everything. That is bigger than all your structures. That's all very interesting.
Yeah, and what I like most about it is the fact that clouds are absolutely magical, because clouds, in a certain sense, don't really exist. All they are droplets of water floating in the air. So there's really nothing there, but yet clouds are extremely powerful, and create the storms that can ravage our planet and nurture the soil and all sorts of other wonderful symbolic things. So clouds, are just great metaphorical devices.
Moving on.
This one is called Tourist. And this represents the idea that everybody is a tourist, no matter how permanent we think we are. And Native American consciousness is kind of like, we were the original ones here. And, we all kind of buy into that, but also they are tourists as well as we are. And then I tried to double down on the metaphor, because this tourist, as permanent as these people are compared to the white settlers, is dressed up in kind of like the white parody of Native American ceremonial clothing, something like that. So that was the idea on this one. And then the other thing, oh, okay, well, we go into this one. So this one is more directly metaphorical in terms of psychological structures, you know, because we have this giant shroud that we're trying to hide, and then we kind of dance around the edges and flirt with it, and it's a reflection of us. And
I love the high wire. I had a dream the other night of someone with on the high wire with coming with eggs, and they were going up this high wire thing. So you deal with a lot of archetypes.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. In my graduate project, I spent a lot of time exploring archetypal patterns, you know, Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung, and then connecting those through the Surrealist movement into patterns of recognition that we may not always be able to readily explain, but they resonate nonetheless.
So for you, the Surrealist touchstone for you was always René Magritte. And let's talk about how that relationship between you and Magritte.
Well, my entry point to Surrealism was just being transfixed by how someone who embraced banality in his own life so readily. He didn't want anything to do with the radicals in Paris. He lived in Brussels, had a very mundane middle-class life with just wonderful wife that he truly loved. And yet he was able to take that banality and connect it to something very deep and resonant. And what I like about that is the fact that what you might think is like conventional American middle-class life has this very staid, conventional presumption of it. But yet so much of it has these very deep and sometimes conflicted tones. And Magritte really tapped into that, and I just thought it was beautiful. And then
and he was able to articulate this extra dimension of consciousness for
that
life. You know, that it wasn't it was a full life when you added that extra dimension.
Yeah, you know, and it gets into what we all know of as kind of like the surrealistic aspects of conventional living.
So we're taking something because again in the art world it's always, well, that was then, you can't repeat these things. See, and again, I believe we're both of the philosophy that there's no need at the moment for the artist to push in other words, art doesn't have to progress. The history of art now is a toolkit for us that technology will progress.
I think so.
In other words, we don't have to look for the next form. Any form is good. The technology itself will cause the progression of art.
There's a lot of truth to that, and people don't realize how much that revolutionary schools and attitudes of production in art were fueled by technical advances. The use of heavy layers of transparency and tints were pioneered by Rembrandt. And then portable paints are what the Impressionists used to go out in the field and do plein air painting. And then Walt Disney was more of a technician than an artist. Modern robots are based on Walt Disney's technology that he used to do creative stuff. And the digital technology, we can take the artistic forms that existed, and now we can blend them into realizations, or let's see, produce pieces, or whatever the term might be. It escapes me right now. But we can create work that didn't exist before, weaving everything together. And digital technology allows you to do that, because we see tremendous work being done by people who incorporate abstract expression, incorporate surrealism, and also incorporate aspects of realism that used to reside only in, for instance, like photography. And now there are a number of artists who blend it all together, both in static images and in motion.
And again, this is what you're looking for is surrealism as a tool for the now.
Yes.
In other words, you're not the work isn't retro. The work
That's right.
is about communicating this particular strange, surreal reality, where the word surrealism is used on the news almost on a daily basis.
Yes.
And you know, the surreality has become the norm, and it is a difficult.
In some ways,
it has become a difficult moment to navigate without that vocabulary, because again, just Salvador Dali. I love this story. He came out of when he landed in New York City. He had them bake this 4-foot piece of bread that he used as a cane, and you know, he was making a surrealist statement.
Right.
But he got to New York and surrealism wasn't there yet, so they didn't have the vocabulary or the eyes to see what he was doing. So it made no impact. It wasn't strange. It was invisible.
And
you know, until you create ways of seeing and give it a language, we don't see. And that's the whole point of art, or one of the chief tenets of art, is to open the eyes. And open the mind.
Surrealism relies on metaphors that tap into a deeper level of consciousness that cannot be so readily explained. And the metaphors change over time. The metaphors that worked in the 30s and the metaphors that work now are radically different.
Yes.
And metaphors connect to different, parts of our culture, because each segment of our culture has their own visual vocabulary. And so tapping into the icons within that vocabulary allows you to access associations, which can prompt meaning. And the best thing is when it prompts deep responses, deep resonances that you can't explain. And Paul Klee, he once said it beautifully. He said, "Don't talk, painter, paint."
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you can learn things visually that you cannot learn through your ears or through reading.
And then the artist's job, again, is to figure out how to be unfiltered. So you're getting a true, you're getting
as
a true,
best you can. Yes.
Thing of, and often what you're getting unfiltered is very uncomfortable. It makes the artist nervous. Our nature is to screen from ourselves and filter from ourselves, because we're fragile people.
Yeah, certainly in this culture, we're just so ego-based, and the presumption that what you see here is who we are here.
Yeah, and just looking at ourselves is not a pretty picture all the time. So to get beyond that is hard.
Yes.
So I'm going to leave us with that.
PatWatsonArt.org.
PatWatsonArt.org. PatWatsonArt.org. I'm with Pat Watson. You're watching YourTown TV. I'm Mark Baer. We'll be back.